You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back. Earlier this week, President Biden announced his long-anticipated student loan forgiveness program. It promises $10,000 to those making under $125,000 per year and $20,000 to those who received Pell Grants, which is a federal grant for low-income students. Joining us now is Dr. Kenneth Kriz, UIS Professor of Public Administration. Thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here, Cole.
This was a long-rumored plan. There were a few false starts on it, and finally, we have the outline for it.
Yes.
What did you think were you surprised when you saw that this was finally announced?
No, I wasn't surprised. I think the administration tried to kind of hit a middle ground, which has been what they've tried to do in a lot of areas. I think probably the more progressive parts of the Democratic caucus wanted a larger amount. And I think it's safe to say that more right-leaning elements wanted less or none at all.
This has really sparked a heated debate across the country, and with people saying that it's a bailout for student loans. It's why should you take out a loan if you're not able to pay it back? And is that simplifying this argument too much when we're talking about how big the student loan crisis is in our country?
Well, I think you hit on a couple of points which I think are valid concerns. I think there is a concern about what economists would call moral hazard whenever you when you make a decision and you don't have to be fully responsible for the consequences of that decision, which this may have the effect of. I don't think we know that for sure because this has never been tried. But I do think that is a concern. On the other hand, there was, I think, a valid concern that the debt problem had grown so large that was causing people to make decisions that they otherwise would not have made. So for example, a doctor may have to become a specialist in order to earn more money instead of a general practitioner, which we may actually need more of in this country. And so I think it's safe to say that there's probably incentive effects on each side that we just have to be cognizant of when we're making this type of policy decision.
So when you talk about being cognizant of this, I mean, is that tracking the effects of that, or is that it just to try to stymie any negative effects this could have, or is this learning from this for potentially the next time this happens, if this does set a precedent?
I'd say it's more of the latter. Learning from this will provide an opportunity for us to look at how people make their decisions when they don't have to have this type of a debt. We'll also get to see what happens in the economy as a whole. We have some simulations about what might happen in the larger economy, but this will offer us an opportunity, some insight on what might happen, with this experiment.
Obviously, you're a professor at the university.
Sure.
You have that firsthand experience of dealing with students who are going through these issues, but also you look at it from the larger macroeconomic scale of what this amount of debt can just do to an entire industry like this. I want to start with that larger scale.
Yeah.
When we have more students, more people with student loan debt that they're trying to chip away at, what kind of effects does that have on the larger economy? And does $10,000 do enough for that? And
I should add that I also have personal experience with this. I still have student loan debt from my graduate school. I already paid off a significant amount from when I was an undergrad. But I also have parental debt from my daughters attending college, and so I have firsthand experience with this. And there might be a small effect on my ability to consume in the future, but as time goes by, it's probably just going to revert back to kind of the level it was before. And that's what most of our macroeconomic models have indicated. I reviewed a few studies of this, and most of them see a fairly decent increase in gross domestic product and maybe payroll employment over the short term. But as you go further on in time, basically the effects fade into the background noise. And so After a while, we're going to see an effect of it, say in the next year, 2 years, maybe up to 3 years. But after that, things are going to fade back into where we were or would have been before.
You're talking about the actual extent of the debt problem.
Yeah. This is the important thing, Cole, to understand is that the debt doesn't go away. I kind of hate the term cancellation because the debt doesn't go away. Basically, it's the federal government buying up the debt. So private balance sheets, so my household balance sheet is going to be better, but we're going to have more national debt. And eventually the national debt is going to have to be paid down, which may require higher taxes. That's why the overall effects over the long run get smaller and smaller.
I also wonder, just kind of capping off this long period of people not having to pay their student loans because of the pandemic. There's been constant freezes. Now we know the final extension of that going to the end of December of this year. Combine that long pause on these payments with this chunk of debt forgiveness. Is that could that I mean, what kind of effects could we see from that? Was there already going to be some negative effects from this long drawn out pause?
Yes, there probably would have been somewhat of a cliff effect when people started to have to make payments again. That obviously their payments will be reduced, if not reduced to zero based upon the $10,000 forgiveness. But there still will be some effect from people starting to make their payments again. For most households, the payments aren't exorbitantly large. This is another concern I've had about how this has been covered. The average payment is in the vicinity, although it's not a great thing, of a couple $100 a month, and that's a lot of money certainly, but it's not the amounts we're talking about. I think the media reports have tend to emphasize, a certain person has $200,000 in debt and is making $1,500 payments. That really, if you look at the overall statistics, is the outlier. But for the average household, $100, $200 a month, that could make a difference in terms of their consumption. So there will be a little bit, since those will start again, there will be a little bit of a take back of the effect we would get from forgiveness just alone.
I've also seen some arguments in favor. You talked about that. The debt for a private household would be forgiven, but then that's just the federal government taking on that debt. I've seen arguments in favor of that strategy, because then the people who are having their debt forgiven have that some more disposable income. That money goes back into the economy and can circulate that way. Is there merit to that?
There is, and so there will be a distributional effect, especially with the $125,000 cap. Lower income households are going to get more of the relief from forgiveness, and upper income households, which pay the majority of the income tax at least in the country, are going to have to service more of the debt payments.
From that larger economics perspective, does this taking on this kind of debt in this way differ from past industry bailouts we've seen? Sure. Like when we saw the auto industry get bailed out, or when we saw banks get bailed out during the housing crisis? Does it differ in any way?
It differs in the sense that those were actual crises. So to be honest, the evidence is mixed on really what it was. But if you think about the logic behind the bailout of the auto companies or some of the financial companies, those were things that could have hit the economy right then. The student debt crisis has been building up for years, and in fact, really, if we saw any economic effects of it, they probably were seen in the past. And so, in a way, we're doing this either to cover up what happened in the past or not. No, I shouldn't say cover up. If you could edit that out, that'd be great. We're doing this in order to redress what happened in the past, or to stave off a potential future crisis, whereas those other bailouts, they were right then. We had to deal with a crisis.
And part of this is all wrapped up in just the increasing cost of higher education in the country. And obviously you've seen that firsthand with the university, but how do you turn that around? Where does it, I mean, that would seem to be the root cause of this, I guess. And I know I'm asking you to say how to your, but that seems to be the root cause in this, correct? Is finding out a way to make college more affordable would keep more people from joining this student loan
it is
stockpile.
There is a certain element of that, and you just asked me a question we could do an entire show on. And I have I have an opinion, and I'll just state it based upon what I think the literature shows. One of the things that we don't cover very well is the difference between a cost increase and a price increase. So you're talking about the price increase, the price that households have to pay in order to have their children attend college. That's a sum really of two parts. One is the cost of an education, okay, the cost of what it takes to provide the educational services, and the subsidy that the federal government and the state governments give to universities in order to cover that cost. So if you look at the overall cost of education, it's gone up on the order of, say, 4 to 5%, maybe 6% a year. It's the mid single digits a year. The problem is the amount that the federal government and the state government have been giving to offset that cost has been shrinking, and in some cases dramatically, to the point where now the price increase is now 8, 10%, things like that. So what people are seeing is partially the effect of the cost going up, but partially the fact that state and the federal governments, state governments and the federal government are providing less to universities. So that might be a different way to do student loan relief going forward, is simply to have more money flowing to the universities from the state government and from the federal government in order to make it so we don't have to increase tuition. I know at UIS we've been fighting tuition increases with exactly that type of logic in mind. And I've sat on tuition committees, and we have made an explicit argument we can't put any more back on the backs of our students. We have that in mind when we're making these decisions. The problem is we're getting less from the state government. And so that difference has to be made up somehow through cuts or through different service combinations or through looking for more international students, for example, who we don't have to rely on that. We can rely on their tuition income because it's higher. Things like that are decisions that universities have had to be making since I've been in this business 20, 25 years.
Well, I think that's all the time we have. I really appreciate you coming on, Doctor.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We'll be right back.